Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, I am talking about becoming a graphic designer or becoming a designer in general. I'll be talking about my journey because I don't think there's any better way to learn than to talk about a lived experience. But I'll also be referring to things that I found online, and I'll be answering questions that have come from you guys. I put out some call outs from people who wanted to learn about design. What kind of things is it that you want to know? But also I've looked at the most common questions on Google and on various forums that I'm looking to answer with my own experience, but also just what I've learned from the industry in general. So a bit about me. I think I've always been pretty creative. I distinctly remember being 7 or 8 years old or something and making my own Pokemon comic. That's like one of the earliest memories I've got. Recently, I posted on Instagram that I made a football book magazine type thing where I spoke about the best player on each team. It was quite a nerdy thing to do. But I've always been into creating things and really enjoying different types of media and thinking about how to create them. And that's something that's been consistent from when I was a kid up until now. I don't have any I have professional background in design, but I didn't study it at university or at school is what I mean. The closest thing that I got to it was I've got a GCSE, which is an exam that you take in the UK when you're 16. I've got a GCSE in DT, which is design technology. That was a lot of woodworking and working with plastics though, but it was pretty creative. I really enjoyed it. And then when I got to university, I wanted to learn about graphic design by proxy of Adobe Photoshop. I was playing around with Photoshop quite a lot. I saw a lot of streetwear clothes that I really wanted to figure out how to design. I basically wanted to figure out what threshold was. I had no idea what it was, but now I use it all the time on Photoshop. But even before that, actually, when I was at school, maybe 15 or 16 or something, that was when everyone was getting into tie-dyes, and I wanted to print images of celebrities or of people or of logos or slogans or whatever onto these tie-dye t-shirts, essentially recreating what I'd see in Camden Market or something. Initially, I looked into inkjet paper transfers where you print an image just as you would printing like a page. You print an image onto this special paper and then you can iron it onto clothes. That obviously doesn't last very long, but that was my first foray, if you will, into creating merch, I suppose. And then I looked into what screen printing was and all the different types of printing outside of screen printing, DTG, DTF, all these different things. Screen printing was the most practical for me because it's something that you can do at home with comparatively less startup cash when compared to DTG and DTF, and it lasts longer. So single color screen printing is what I used to do when I was at school. And then going to university, when I had a bit of money, I had a job, so I wanted to outsource it and started trying to make my own brand. Sold to a few people at university, sold to a few different countries at university, which was a lot of fun. And just got a bit of a knack for it. I remember trying to create my university bedroom into a studio, and I just got a bunch of tin foil and stuck it everywhere in the corner of my room to make it a makeshift studio for like this space kind of look. I think I saw something with Billionaire Boys Club doing something similar, so I tried to recreate it. Anyway, always been creative, but never professionally from an educational point of view. But I was designing a t-shirt about Kobe Bryant, I think, and figuring out how to use threshold. And my flatmate at the time, shout out Deck Gibson, and his band actually, the Fat Stacks. They're an amazing band based in Edinburgh. So go check them out. But shout out to Deck, he was my flatmate at the time, and he said, why don't you look into graphic design, try and do a graphic design course or something. Didn't know what graphic design was, looked into it, fell in love with it, didn't really look back. I finished my degree at Edinburgh in Spanish and history, and then I ended up doing a master's in history. I was bang into my sociological history based in the UK, looking into different things to do with like race and colour and immigration in the UK, that kind of thing. Did that in Manchester, for a master's, but one of the key things that I was trying to do is present it in a way which wasn't prose. I was really interested in presenting these ideas graphically, or trying to create merch around a certain idea. And that's the first time really that I got looking into the nuts and bolts of what brand is, and thinking about what a brand can stand for and how it can unify a group of people. And that was Black Square Summer. That was around the same time. So I was creating a lot of face masks with different like black figures from British history on it, but also t-shirts, and really, really delving into black history, the history of immigration in the UK, and trying to present that in a kind of creative way. That is the first time I sort of began to think about my own personal design language, as opposed to the way that I manipulate words in an essay, for example. After university, I worked for a PR firm in tech. It was a creative job, but not in the way that I wanted to be creative. It was creative in the sense of trying to figure out ways to create a story. That's essentially what PR is. But I wanted to go more down the graphics route, which there wasn't as much space for in my particular role. So I left after almost 2 years, and I got my first job in graphic design. And that's what this whole episode is all about. So that was a whistle-stop tour. After I finished my master's, and when I started working in PR, really soon after I started, I undertook the 365 challenge, which was trending, or it had been and gone a little bit. I was a little bit late to the party. It was the account Overset Text on Instagram that put me on. He went viral and he got like tens of thousands of followers through this challenge. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try and do the same thing. I did not get tens of thousands of followers, but I got a lot more from that experience, which was practicing my own creative muscle, training my own creative muscle. You need to turn up every day and create something and publish it. In my industry, in graphic design, I was creating graphics and publishing it every day. A lot of the time, I wouldn't know what to talk about. I wouldn't know what to create a graphic about. And I'd create a graphic about not knowing what to create a graphic about and just put it out there. Eventually, I became really dissociated, or detached, actually. I became detached from the result and from the gratification, the external gratification of posting, because no one really cared. It seemed like, anyway, and it was all about the inputs. I just wanted to show up every day. And sometimes I'd miss a day, but I'd make up for it the next day by posting twice or something like that. And through doing this, a few different things happened. As I said, I trained my own creative muscle, and I was able to come up with ideas and see things in a particular way. Things were happening in the world. I've already mentioned in the UK, we had about 15 prime ministers in 2 weeks. So I was creating a lot of graphics about that. But as the news was going, instead of passively consuming the news, I was thinking, oh, what's a witty angle of this that I can use, that I can take advantage of in my own work? So I began living, even if I was consuming things, I was consuming with the intention of producing something from it. From my work in PR, I became quite used to, or I started becoming aware of newsjacking, which is essentially jumping on what's trending. And I just did that with my graphics a lot. And it wasn't necessarily to jump off of a trending story, but it was because if something's trending, then it means that there's a slightly new conversation about it, or there might be a new angle to take, or everyone might be going left and you could go right, or something like that. So I'd really recommend doing that. The good thing about the news cycle is that each news story only lasts for about 24 hours. So you can find a news story, create a graphic of it, and then by tomorrow it's going to be been and gone, and you need to go again, and there'll be another news story that you can leverage. So I'd always recommend, number one, get reps in, and that doesn't stop after a year. You need to keep doing it. But the reason I was doing it was because I didn't have a portfolio of work. But by the end of that year, I had over 300 pieces of work, which showed that I can essentially take a brief. The brief was one that I set for myself, but the brief was to create a graphic that would resonate with people, that could live on social media, that spoke about a very specific story, that gave a specific angle about a story. I can come up with an angle. Just because a brief wasn't given to me by an external party doesn't mean that there wasn't one set there. And I'm massively into my sport. I work in the sports industry now. I work in football. So a lot of the graphics that I was making would be around, Champions League final. I think City won the treble that season, so I made a treble, like Champions whatever graphic as well. And I could use those examples in my portfolio to get my first gig as a graphic designer in football. So one of the major things, which is something that Google actually recommends, is to build a portfolio. And a lot of people question, well, how do I build a portfolio without any work? You need work to get work. You need work to get experience. But you can find ways of creating your own portfolio. And I'd say make sure that the work in your portfolio, especially if it's not professional, if it's just spec work, is the kind of work that you'd want to attract. What you put out, especially in design, is what you attract, because people who are seeing your portfolio will only hire you if you're creating work which they quite like. Whether it's big global clients or kind of smaller musicians, I've worked with both types of clients, and both will say in the initial brief, oh, I really liked this piece of work that you made. Can you tell me about how you did it? And can we maybe approach this project in a similar way? That portfolio gives you a really useful launch pad off which you can fire off all sorts of ideas, and off of which your client can also begin the conversation and deliver a really good brief. So I'd say first and foremost, build the portfolio, but also build your skill of being able to take an idea, a news item, a concept, and create something out of it. It's a really important skill to start off with, and you don't need permission to do it. You don't need a brief to do it. You can just start whenever. So that's how I got into graphic design. My first gig was at Watford Football Club, and it was great. It's been amazing, and it was great to that was the moment where I turned a hobby into something professional, full-time. Don't get me wrong, before Watford, it wasn't just the 365-day challenge that I presented. I'd got graphic design work beforehand. I've already mentioned Arttype, the agency that I worked for when I was at uni. And the way that I got into Arttype brings me to my second point, which is about building a network. So I do not go out, but I met the founder of Arttype, Josh, who is a really close friend of mine, on the only night out that I went on when I was living in Madrid. It was right before COVID hit, and I'd been there for a few weeks. So I wasn't really going out. I was settling in, blah, 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 blah. And I went out with one of my friends, and then I ended up meeting Josh. He's from a similar area to me. We work in the same industry, and he had already founded Arttype. And then we kind of connected. When we got back to London, we were talking, and then I ended up doing some work for Arttype. Initially as a researcher, I studied history. It made sense. But when I told him that I wanted to get involved in design and I actually had some ability, I had practiced on the entire Adobe suite, yada, yada, yada. I managed to get some design work, which I'm really, really grateful for, because that was my first kind of break as a designer. But I'd already put in quite a lot of work that I could show Josh, and then Josh and Jaden, actually, the creative director at Arttype at the time, also another close friend of mine, they both showed me the ropes, and I learned a lot about working for a client when it comes to the creative industries, and I just learned a lot. So that was also another thing. But that wouldn't have come about, that experience wouldn't have come about had I not been outside and made myself open to the possibility of networking. So I'd say number 2, make sure you're always building your network. There is a Substack article that I read about this recently, and it talks about a challenge. And I want to say the challenge is to grow your network by 100 people. And it might sound quite daunting, but it's quite an encouraging thing to do. And it takes a softer stance to 75 hard or something. There's no set end date necessarily, although I think if you set an end date, it would be better because then you keep yourself honest. And from what I remember, the idea is this: you map out 10 very specific goals or targets that you have for yourself, and then you map out 10 specific people for each target that you can connect with to try and move closer to that target. And my approach to it has been, sure, it can be someone that you know, i.e. a warm lead, or it can be a cold lead. It can be someone who you might have on LinkedIn or someone that you see around but haven't really connected with, like a lukewarm lead, or it can be someone completely cold. Someone on LinkedIn, for example, that you don't know, but you have maybe a mutual friend or something. And you create this web, and then you just go about relentlessly trying to find these different people to connect you to different things and to move you further down the path of whatever goal it is that you're trying to get to. And I think it's super helpful. Generally, people want to help people, and it's a bit of a status symbol to be able to say, oh yeah, I know that person, so I can intro you or something like that. Unfortunately, it's becoming less so actually, but I think the creative industries can be quite gatekept. So it's almost a situation that in order to have someone help you, you need to position it as if they're flexing. So if you're talking about not wanting to meet someone, but if you're talking about wanting to get into a specific space and someone's like, oh, I already occupy that space, then them saying that and then being able to be like, oh yeah, we can do this or whatever, that is a flex to them, but then that person might be useful to get to. And it is manipulative, and it is kind of having sharp elbows and all this sort of stuff. But I think it's something that, especially in London, you need to be prepared to do. There are also so many people, Hilary at Sonder especially democratized the creative industries in London. The stuff that they're doing at Sonder is amazing. I managed to meet one of my idols, Pablo from Pablo T-Shirts Factory, in the summer through Sonder. And I met a bunch of other great creatives as well. So there are also initiatives where you can broaden your horizons and broaden your network. You just need to make the effort to go to those things or to initiate that effort. Being in and amongst it is really, really useful. But the example with Josh for me in Madrid is just one example that shows that network is invaluable, because in a very real sense, if I hadn't met Josh, there's a very good chance that it would have taken me a lot longer to get to where I am now. Your network is almost like speeding up the treadmill to get you to where you want. It gives you wind behind your back, wind in your sails to get you to where you want to go further. So your network is really important as well. A lot of people talk about courses and graphic design courses. I personally don't think courses are necessary. I mean, I'm living proof that courses aren't necessary. I've never done a graphic design course in my life. You learn a lot. If you have the intention to create good work, you'll learn a lot by doing good work. This is something that I developed. I've been playing the guitar, electric and acoustic, since I was about 7. And I did a lot of grades. I went all the way up to grade 7, could have done grade 8, but I decided not to. The whole time I was doing grades, I never wanted to do them. I just wanted to play songs. And playing songs and learning songs, I would argue, has taught me a lot more than doing grades ever did, because the songs are constructed like Hey Jude or something, or any Oasis song. It's constructed in a way where, okay, so there's a pattern, like, you know, you've got a 2-5-1 chord sequence and that sounds quite nice. So there's this, or this is in the key of E flat. So I need to play this kind of solo, or I need to play it up this side of the neck. Like all of these different things you learn on the job, but you learn it from like the passion of wanting to learn it. Whereas if it's a syllabus, it takes it away from you. It's not as authentic. So I learn everything that I know about graphic design through seeing good work and trying to recreate it, which is another point, probably point 3, which is you need to first develop your taste. So expose yourself to amazing work, which is really easy to do nowadays. In London, a lot of museums and galleries are free, but Instagram, showcase. It's literally a highlight reel. So all the creators on Instagram are generally showcasing their best work. A lot of magazines nowadays, they need to do a lot more to keep people subscribing because everything's gone digital. So if you see any print magazines that are still in print, you best know that that design is probably really good. Design is abundant, it's everywhere. You just need to see it with the intention of maybe recreating it or trying to get your head into the mind of a designer who created something like that and think, okay, how can I replicate that? How can I take little elements from that? And that's all I did, really. I was looking at a lot of designers, especially in the sports industry, and just trying to recreate their styles. Some of them, Ethan J Design, Calso Scoped, they have tutorials on YouTube, which are super helpful, but others don't. And it literally can be a case of deconstructing whatever element of a piece of design that you like and trying to think, okay, well, how did they design that? But not necessarily the how, but also the why. Why is it that they chose these colors, or why is it that they chose this treatment and things like this? And then you literally get into the mind of that designer and you can recreate that same really good work. So I think that pays a lot more dividends than doing a graphic design course, but I'm biased. I've never done a graphic design course, so maybe that's not fair to say. Who knows? But if you are doing a graphic design course, you're already ahead of where I was. But if you're not, don't think that that means that you can't become a graphic designer or indeed a designer, because it's just about developing your taste, seeing good work, and wanting to create work that can live amongst that. If you love a specific gallery or you love a specific exhibition, you should want to create work that could live in that exhibition, or even better, could be the stand-up piece in that exhibition. That's what it's about going for. Me personally, when I first started going through this journey, I just wanted to create great sports graphic design. So I just wanted to create work that I could imagine seeing my idols making, but like the top tier, the creme de la creme of that. And sometimes I wouldn't do it, but it's about the intention of trying to constantly and just getting those reps in. Reps are so important. So yeah, I don't think a graphic design course is necessary, but it can be useful if you have got one. Graphic design books are useful, but I'm a bit of a book crazy person. I love books, so maybe I'm biased in that way as well. I don't think they're necessary, but they can really help. If a good bit of design is made it into a book, there are so many different filters that something needs to go through to be published as a book, so you can probably be sure that it's top tier. And that's the kind of thing that you want to be inputting in your brain so that what comes out is also top tier as well. Learning industry tools. This is really important, and it's something you can do through a course, but it's also something that I think you can just do going about your business. I learned Photoshop because I saw something and I wanted to figure out how to make it. I didn't go through each tab and think, okay, well, what does this do? What does that do? What does the next one do? I know Photoshop like the back of my hand now, and I don't think there are any aspects of Photoshop that I've not used before. But that's come because I've done so many reps of different graphic design projects. And that, I think, is the more authentic way of using it, but also that's the way that we remember it more. We remember things more when it's a natural process of learning it rather than a syllabus. Even with language, we learn our native language quicker because we're exposed to it just all the time. Whereas when we sit down and study a language when we're at school or something, we don't acquire it as quickly, and it's about acquisition, skill acquisition, and you acquire skills when it's just in your day-to-day. So I'd recommend not sitting down and saying, right, I'm going to study these design tools now or whatever. I'd say just make it part of your day-to-day. And if there's a part of Photoshop or whatever that you don't really use, then you don't really use it. I didn't use InDesign until I got my gig at Watford because there was no need for me to, really. But now I use it all the time because there's a need for me to. I don't really use Illustrator because I'm not an illustrator. But then when I started to learn how to make logos, I did use Illustrator. So now I see it as more of a logo making tool. different tools are used for different things. And if your thing is over here, then you don't need to know about everything that's over here. It's about picking a lane and sticking to it and being an expert in that lane, and then expanding as and when you need to for your own project, not because you feel like you have to. I think that's really important. What else have we got here? So consider a graphic design internship. So this is essentially what I'd consider Archetype gave me. It wasn't an unpaid internship. I'm very grateful that I was paid when I was working for Archetype. But getting professional work that isn't as daunting maybe as a full-time gig, I think is really useful, because one of the major skills of a designer, or anyone in the creative industries really, is the ability to take a brief and answer it really, really well. And do it tastefully, do it with their own design language, but most importantly, to make the client happy. That is the job of a designer. If all you care about is your creative output, you're not a designer, you are an artist. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. If you want to be a designer, it's about pleasing people. It's about providing a service for someone else and being paid for that. So doing that, no matter how small, answering a brief is really important, and it pays dividends. I've been in interviews before. I've also interviewed before when I've asked, okay, can you give me an example of a time that you came up with a creative idea from a brief? And you go down a rabbit hole and you say, yeah, I received this brief and initially I thought this, but then I went down this rabbit hole and I decided to take it this way. And actually, if this was happening at the time, so with this context, it would be funny if we did this, blah, 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 blah. And it's your own interpretation of it. The great thing is that it's your interpretation. There isn't really a right or wrong answer, but you need to show that you have the skill of taking on a brief and producing something with it, which is why, again, if you're not getting any professional briefs from a human client, you can create your own one. And the 365 challenge gives you one every single day. There's also 1-minute briefs on Twitter, which is great. I didn't realize, stupidly, from the name, it's a bit obvious, but I didn't realize that you had to create everything in 1 minute or less. So I'd spend literally like an hour or two on designs of 1-minute briefs, which obviously didn't win because they clearly weren't made with 1 minute. But again, that's really good at practicing that creative muscle. You just want to receive briefs and produce something from it and answer the brief. That's the key thing. And you can get that through a kind of design internship. I'd recommend just getting any kind of work that you can. And if it's paid, then great. If it's spec work, then also great. You know, get what work you can. It's about practicing and training that creative muscle and just getting reps in. Get certified and improve your resume. So I think resumes are interesting. I'll speak really briefly about this. I think resumes are interesting because everyone's using AI to write resumes now, and everyone's using AI to read resumes now. So you need to use like AI tools to get around that. In my experience, the portfolio is more important because it shows what work you can actually do. All of the design jobs that I've gone for and the design jobs that I've interviewed for, they've all come with a task that candidates either complete on-site in the interview. They have like an hour to just work on it, or more commonly, it can be over a weekend or over a week or something. They take it away and create something from it and then present it back. So that, I think, is the most important thing. Generally, the first interview is with someone from like HR or something, just like a screening interview, and then you take a task and you work on that task. And that's the really crucial bit. But I think the more crucial bit is not necessarily what you've done, it's being able to talk about it. Again, it's being able to talk about how it is that you've answered the brief and being able to present your idea to the client, who in this case is your potential employer. So yeah, I think more important than the resume, arguably, is your portfolio, but also your ability to perform on the day or during the weekend or during the week when you've got that creative task, which again is about how many reps you've done before and your ability to use that creative muscle and flex it as much as you can, essentially. Okay, some more questions. I got asked a question, how much is a graphic designer paid in the UK? The answer is it depends. It depends on the client, it depends on what work you're doing, it depends on if you're freelance, part-time, full-time, a combination of all of them. It entirely depends. I've met people who are a graphic designer on 25k. I've met people who are a graphic designer on 80k, and I've met people who are a graphic designer on more than that. So there's a whole spectrum. If you're looking for a salary census, major players have one. They released their one in the summer, I think. So the data is from quite a recent survey. But major players UK, and then you can look at the creative page and see how much people in your role are getting paid, whether it's full-time, part-time, creative, not creative, whether it's an agency or not, or in-house. So I'd recommend looking there for an average. And also they have bands, they have like the average range. But well and truly, it can vary massively. What I'd say is a really useful thing that I found is expanding your network, and always just try to provide more value than the next person. And it's not really about skill anymore, because technology is leveling out the playing field when it comes to skill. It's more about your creative ideas and the way that you see things. So it varies, is my answer to that. How much a graphic designer gets paid in the UK. Can I learn graphic design in 3 months? Yeah, you can. I think you can learn anything in 3 months, but it depends on to what degree you want to learn it. I don't think you ever stop learning in any industry. I think you just get better, or you get exposed to more things. So yeah, you can learn graphic design in 3 months. Whether you'll be able to get a job after those 3 months depends on how intense those 3 months were, depends on how creative you are, how strong your creative muscle is, because it is a muscle, it's something that you train. So it depends on, you might have been training it subconsciously for years before those 3 months, and then you just need to execute it in those 3 months in a graphic design kind of way. Who knows? So yeah, you can, but unfortunately I'm going to be diplomatic here and say it's all pretty situational. Can AI replace graphic designers? Yes, AI probably will replace graphic designers, because especially junior and mid-level graphic designers, I would imagine, are execution people. It's less about coming up with the creative idea or the creative concept, and more, although that's changing a little bit, so we'll see. But it's more about executing a design idea. It's more about the skills that you can do. And AI is good at executing things, which is a shame, as I've mentioned before, because it means we're going to see the erosion of craft when it comes to like what humans can do with their hands. But it also means that humans will be able to spend more time on coming up with creative ideas, which AI can't do. So I think that it's going to be more a situation of graphic designers are going to become creative directors, really, and going to have to become creative directors, where humans are going to need to lead their own army or their own team of AI robots. The same way that a creative director now might have their army, which consists of a senior designer, midweight designer, junior designer, intern designer, art worker, whatever. Now, every human is going to be that creative director, and all the roles below, pretty much, are going to be taken over by AI. That's what I perceive. I don't know when it's going to happen. Technology is always accelerating, so it could happen sooner than we think. It could happen later. I'm not sure when, but if there's one trend that's been consistent when it comes to technology, it's that the skills that humans are paid for become less about what we can do with our hands and more about what we can do with our brains. That's pretty much the general direction throughout history that technology's taken us in. So yeah, I think AI will replace graphic designers, but I don't think that means that people are going to be out of a job. I just think that the job is going to become more senior earlier, and we're going to need to actually be creative in terms of the ideas that we come up with, because the execution will be taken by AI. Although I'm not sure, because AI is also really perfect, and part of what resonates with humans is imperfections, and we can see that. Charlie Puth put up a video recently about how AI can't just create music because there are imperfections in music all the time. September by Earth, Wind and Fire starts off with a certain BPM, and then it finishes at a way faster BPM, which isn't perfect, but we think it's perfect and we think it's great. And that kind of human imperfection only comes with humans. So who knows? Similarly, in a way, the Parthenon on the Acropolis, the pillars, they're not completely straight. They actually come out because to the human eye, which is imperfect, if it comes out slightly, then it looks perfectly straight. Whereas if the pillars were perfectly straight, they'd look distorted to our eyes. So humans are imperfect, which means imperfect art is what resonates with us. And if all AI can create is perfect art, then it won't resonate with us. And if it doesn't resonate with us, it won't make money. So who knows? In terms of the pessimistic outlook, yeah, AI will replace us. Technology will replace us with execution work. In reality, who knows? Because humans love imperfect stuff. So we'll see. I'm not an oracle. We will see. Are 90% of graphic designers freelancers? I've got no idea. Is graphic design a stressful job? Yes, it definitely can be. I think it's really important to be organized. I think creatives get an interesting rep that we're all whimsical and we kind of are very la about things. And I don't think that's entirely true. It can be true, maybe in some cases, but I don't think that's entirely true. I think creatives need to be very disciplined because we need to be more la and whimsical in terms of the creative ideas that we come up with. Like throwing things at the wall is one of my favorite things to do in the ideation process because anything goes. Like there's no bad ideas and all of this sort of stuff. But in order to do that, you need to have the discipline to have boundaries in your life. It's kind of having the discipline to be creative. And I think creatives need to have that balance almost down to an art form. So it is stressful. It can be stressful with all the admin. Dealing with clients can be really stressful, but I think that's the same with any job that deals with clients. Being a creative and working with clients, I think a lot of the time, design and creative work is underpaid because it's seen as a nice to have. And I understand where that comes from. I disagree with it entirely. And I think if you go one step beyond the immediate, it's a nice to have because it doesn't immediately bring in money or whatever it might be, whatever delusions we tell ourselves. If you go one step beyond that, you realize that actually the creative industries are absolutely vital. I could rant about this for ages, but during COVID, how were people coping? It was through watching TV. It was through connecting with people. It was through reading books. Everyone found their own creative outlet or their own creative consumption to deal with that. When people pass, what do we read? What do we recite? We recite poetry. We, think about the creative moments. We use creative output to resonate with us and to illustrate how it is that we feel about that person. I think the creative industries are absolutely vital to the well-being of society, Now, it doesn't necessarily make as much obvious impact to the bottom line, but that doesn't mean it doesn't make a massive impact. And I think all you need to do is open your eyes to see that. So I could rant more, but I think I'd need to collect my words a little bit more rather than this riffing. So yeah, that's what I think about that. How is math used in graphic design? I was good at maths. I don't really use it a lot in graphic design. The Fibonacci sequence, I love it. And it astounds me in so many different ways. So there's this thing called the golden ratio, which is like 1.618, I think. It's looking at the perfect ratios between different things. And you see that a lot in nature. And it's really pleasing to the eye. So if you've got a headline, for example, or a title, the Fibonacci sequence or the golden ratio could tell you, okay, well, how big should the subheading be? And then the body text below that or something like that. Really, I work off my eye quite a lot. I might use the golden ratio as a guide, but I don't use it too much. Rule of thirds, I try to use quite a lot, to be honest, because I really enjoy it. And it's good, again, to use as a guide. The golden spiral I use when appropriate, but I think it can get rinsed quite a lot. And people can just use it for the sake of using it, and it actually throws off the whole composition. So use it with caution. The Fibonacci sequence in and of itself, where each number is the sum of the preceding two numbers, is absolutely fascinating. It's apparently the best way to learn new content if you use flashcards, for example, and you are exposed to that content on day 1 and then day 2, then day 3, then day 7, and then so on and so forth in the Fibonacci sequence. Then you will just retain it, and then eventually the gap between each number will be like a year, and you can just look at something once a year and still remember it, for example. And I've used it before when I was learning Spanish, so it works. Maths fascinates me. I use it sparingly in design, not to say that I can't use it more, but I try to not be too rigid with it, because then I end up designing to fit within those boundaries rather than designing to answer the brief perfectly. So if I make it more about maths than the brief, then I'm probably going to lose. What jobs will AI not replace? AI won't replace the interpretation of a brief or the creative idea that comes out of that brief. So those are the two things that we should really prioritize. And generally, if you get those two things right, the execution, that can always be tweaked, that can always be changed. We can always refer to more people about it. But the real gold is in the interpretation of a brief and the creative idea that comes as a result of that. How do you introduce yourself as a graphic designer? Hi, I'm a graphic designer. That's how I do it. What skills should a graphic designer have? I've kind of gone over these. Dealing with clients is absolutely key. Presenting is absolutely key. Obviously, right now you need to be good at the Adobe Suite, Figma, CapCut probably, because graphic designers and videographers, the lines are getting blurred a little bit now. You kind of need to be able to do both. So those things, I'd say color theory is really nice to have as well, and typography. Have a little deck of maybe 5 serif, 5 sans serif fonts, and maybe 5 special fonts that you can rely on that look quite special and that go well together. Font pairings are really important, and you can have like your own design language with your own font pairing. Color is really, really important. I don't really understand color theory. I get it enough to make nice compositions that flow quite well though. And also I think perspective in graphic design is really important, i.e. the order of layers and how you create a kind of hierarchy. And that can be through adding a drop shadow, for example, to really make writing or whatever it is stand out. There are a bunch of different ways to do that, but making sure that you have hierarchy and order and knowing where the viewer's eye moves to first and how it flows is really important. Those are just a few skills. But again, you pick those things up as you consume good work with the eye of a producer. So if you're looking at really great graphic design, look at where your eye moves to first and why it moves in this direction and how the designer has generated that. It can even be a road sign that does that for you, So consume everything thinking like a designer. Think like a designer is the point. And is graphic design good for introverts? Maybe, I suppose. I think, yeah, I suppose so, because it's very like execution based. I would say that all of the great graphic designers that I know, everyone can be introverted, but you need to be willing to defend your work, because if you don't, no one will, especially when it comes to the creative industries. You need to be willing to defend your work. So if you're introverted, that's fine, but you can't be introverted at the expense of yourself or your work. And then as a byproduct of that, you can't be introverted to the extent that you don't want to expand your network or you don't want to work with people or anything like that. It can't go that far. But that's, I think, just like a business skill as well. So it can be good for introverts, but to what end? I don't think you'd be helping yourself by thinking, right, I can just stay in my bedroom and not see anyone for days on end. I'm not sure if that's what the question exactly was referring to, though. What's required to get a job as a graphic designer? Intention, I would say. Intention. I think I'm proof that although I've had tons of help and I've been very fortunate and very lucky in so many different ways, I think to an extent I'm living proof that you don't need to have a bunch of prerequisites to become a graphic designer. You can just have the intention to do it and do everything that you can that's in your power to become one. And that's what I did, and it's taken a while, but I'm there, and who knows what's next. Just keep moving forward with it. Those are all the questions that I had, and those are all the different points that I brought up on Google. I hope that this episode has been somewhat useful, if not quite lengthy. This is the longest episode so far. We're at 45 minutes, give or take. But I really appreciate everyone, as always, for listening. This is now episode 4, which is great. I think, most podcasts stop after like a handful of episodes, so I'm planning to make it past that if I haven't already. But I appreciate you very much for listening or for watching if you're on YouTube. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Please like, subscribe, follow, do all the different things. If you think a friend would find this useful, please share it with them. It really helps. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.